on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 46 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. My name's Kyle Sutherland. This is our first episode of 2025. Took a little bit of a hiatus after we got done with football to enjoy the holidays, and it's honestly been a little bit crazy. As we know, during the holiday season, you kind of forget what day it is, probably from about Christmas through the New Year. So getting a little bit in the groove of that. And then, of course, Mother Nature decided to put a damper on some things, at least in the late part of the week with snow that came through. I know some of you got at various parts of the state got over a foot of snow. We got around 9-10 inches where I'm at here in central Arkansas. So a lot of beauty, but also it causes a lot of chaos at the same time. So hopefully we can get back in the swing of things. I know we got some more weather coming through here in the next week or so, but we'll worry about that when we cross that bridge. But if you have not already subscribed, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and hit that notification bell so that way you're notified when we release an episode. Also, we're on the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We are there, so you can find us on any of those platforms. And on this episode, we are going to, of course, be talking hoops since that is the season that we're in right now. And got a lot to unpack here. We've had some teams that fared really well through the non-conference schedule. And as expected, there are some teams that are doing better than we thought they might and some that are not. So we'll talk about those that are possibly starting to heat up, or maybe some that are also taking a little bit of a slip here as we get into the beginning of the second half of the season. And we're going to be joined by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette's Erick Taylor, who great friend of mine, but also, in my opinion, is probably the hardest working guy in Arkansas sports media when you think about what he does with high school sports on top of college. There's many times where he'll cover a high school game, then turn right back around and do a college. See that quite a bit with him. And to me, there's nobody else in the state to chop it up with more so, especially on the hoop side, than Erick. So I'll go ahead and quit talking. We'll get right into that conversation. Here is our dive into the current Arkansas hoops landscape with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette's Erick Taylor. We are now joined by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette's Erick Taylor. Erick, I know you and I were multiple sports. We've covered a lot of games over the past few years, but I think it's probably been about three and a half years since we've actually done a podcast together. I think it was 21 that we did that last with football. So definitely good to be talking hoops. I know that you have really since the beginning of the season, starting with the Conway tournament that had a great field, King Cotton. You've done a lot of different ones throughout the years, but I guess we're used to winter weather affecting things, especially once we get into basketball. But of course we got it the first week of conference play as we were trying to end the week.
That's when the season is really here, when you get some kind of some winter weather that kind of postpones games and cancels games, and that lets you know that, okay, yeah, we're in hoop season now when that happens, man. So, which could be a good thing sometimes, but then again, when you're pushing everything back, that could be a bummer as well, man.
I think, no doubt. I think there's a lot of coaches that prepare. Well, every coach is, especially the ones that have been doing this for a long time. They know there's going to be at least one or two of those. So hopefully, like you said, we met our quota on one of them, and then we don't have this happen too many more times. But
knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood, exactly. So, well, getting into it here. So for those that don't know, Erick does a top 10 overall for the Democrat-Gazette, and then, of course, a top 6 for each classification. I do a top 25 now for SI. I've done that. Well, not formerly SB Live. And then, of course, I've done that for the past 4. I guess this is my 4th year doing that. And Erick, one thing that I noticed with your top 10, you and I do think, which this might be boring to some people because you and I actually don't disagree on a whole lot. So it's kind of boring in that regard that we think a lot alike. But starting with the girls, I was going through after I had published mine and you had published yours, I was kind of comparing everything. And the only difference you and I had, you had PA, undefeated 4A PA team under Becky. You replace one Hall of Famer with another Hall of Famer as Rick Treadway goes to Sheridan and Becky Yarbrough comes in to PA. And I was pretty much about to flip a coin. Do I want to put North Little Rock in that 10 spot, or do I want to put PA? I went with North Little Rock mainly due to the strength of schedule. Not to say at all that PA does not deserve that spot, but for the most part, the top 10, it kind of does it for itself. When you think about the head-to-head matchups, of course, I think a lot of people, like the biggest, which, we had Farmington and Conway and Farmington at 1 and 2, and there's a great debate there, especially with the way that both of those teams finished the non-conference schedule. But just kind of starting in 6A, the past 2 years, you've had an all 7, I'm still in football, an all 6A Central semifinal matchups there in 2023 and 2024. This year, Harbor is another one of those West teams that's looking really well. I know we both got them at number 3. Of course, too, Northside, Springdale, with Coach Hunsucker, with what she's done, particularly in the past 2 years with that turnaround with Springdale. We know kind of what we've got in the Central for the most part, or at least when you look at history over the past 2 years with some of the way these teams, or the way some of these teams have been playing. What's kind of your outlook with the West right now? Not just from where we might have these teams ranked, but just kind of from what you've seen overall.
You know what? I think this year in the West, and I know a lot of these coaches probably will agree with what I'm about to say. On paper, it may not look as if it's wide open, but honestly, it probably is more wide open than it's been in a little while. One of the teams that's kind of gone under the radar is Fayetteville. It's like, they lost a couple of kids, had a key player transfer out, but Fayetteville is actually playing well, and that's a team that no one's talking about, and another one I think is actually getting better as the season progresses is Bentonville. You have the North Sides and the Harbors, and Springdale's playing really well, man. But Fayetteville and Bentonville, I think, are two teams that are going to have something to say about who actually wins that conference, to be quite honest with you. I know, the start of the season, they didn't get a lot of traction as far as teams to look out for in the West, really, and the statewide level as well. But I saw Bentonville play their first game of the year in Conway. And, that was a team that was evident that they had talent on the roster. But you can also tell as the season goes on, and from what I can tell, that's a team that I think toward the end of the year, no one's going to want to play, especially in the playoffs. They're getting better. Same thing with Fayetteville, man. So, but right now, of course, I think Harbor, Springdale, and Northside are the top 3 over in the West, and rightfully so. They played that way. Now I watched that Springdale Northside game last Saturday go down to the wire, man, and it's going to be a dogfight, really. I think it's really those 3. But again, like I said, Bentonville, Fayetteville is going to have something to say about how that all turns out, I think.
And I mentioned Farmington a second ago, and we knew that they were just like last year. I think you actually had them at number 1 finish last year overall, and I did too. It was that 1-2 range that pretty much everybody did. And we knew they were going to have another solid squad coming in this year. And the crazy thing about this, Eric, is when I was talking to people about Farmington last year, I'm like, this team went basically, other than their the varsity Duncanville loss last season, from 7th through 12th grade, all of those teams went unbeaten against in-state competition. And the craziest part was arguably the best basketball player on campus was in 8th grade last year. Yeah. Easton McCullough, that's got offers from all over the place and is having a great freshman year. But then you think about Zoe Brashears, Casey McCumber, Marin Adams, Morgan Ewers going to play college softball, but as a key one that does really good things for him. And, Coach Johnson had talked about that stretch that they had in Tennessee. That was about probably the toughest one that they have had in school history, and came out 3-1 out of that. And then you look at just that 5A West Conference, and you've got a really tough Mountain home team. And then, of course, Greenwood. I know that Greenwood had a tough non-conference, but, of course, there was some things with the coaching situation there, and then Coach Castleman gets promoted like in October. They play that brutal non-conference schedule. So to me, just looking at the 5A West, of course, Farmington right now, I know Greenwood is the 3-time defending state champion, but I think probably Farmington is the team to beat until someone proves otherwise. But I feel like Greenwood is really due, especially with the way that they played against Van Buren in that opener. They're really due for a second-half surge here. That's
a team, again, and it may sound cliche, but that's one that no one's going to want to play come postseason time, man. It's Greenwood, regardless of who's coaching. Across their chest, Lady Bulldogs. They are a championship caliber squad every year. And like you said, Farmington right now, they have an argument to be the number one team in the state overall, to be quite honest with you. I've got Conway in that slot. But yeah, Farmington and Mountain Home, I think, are the two. And I'm really looking forward to those two games between those teams. I'm probably going to go up. I was telling Coach Johnson a couple weeks ago that I was probably going to come up to one of those games when they got Mountain Home. But those two teams in the West, man, I think are clear and above right now, the top two. But again, like you mentioned, Greenwood, who wants to play Greenwood, period? You know what I'm saying? I mean, regardless of what they lost, they've got plenty of experience back, girls that's played within the system for years, and now a lot of kids graduated, but they've waited their turn right now. And now they're there. And honestly, they're playing better. Like you mentioned, they had a tough non-conference schedule, man. But they fought in the majority of those games. And now conference play, and again they came out and basically ran Van Buren off the court, in their conference opener, man. So again, that's a team that I literally believe is going to again continue to get better as the year progresses. But I would love to see when they come across Farmington, the Mountain Homes of the world, how they have improved since the early part of the year. So that's something to look forward to, man.
Looking over at the East, as long as you've covered high school sports, as long as you covered sports in general in this state, that East Conference, especially with I know Paragold's been down, but usually that's a really good squad. But then you think about West Memphis, Marion. We saw with Marion, and this has been talked about probably more times than Coach Johnson would care for it to, but we talked about how throughout the offseason how precious those conference wins are. This was a Marion team that was 7 games over 500 and didn't make it to the state tournament. I think they came up just like a few points shy. It was between them and Nettleton, if I remember correctly. But just such a deep conference year in and year out. Of course, Erick goes to at least from West Memphis and is now at UAPB as their head coach. But West Memphis, still both the boys, we'll talk about them here in a second. They're looking a lot better in year one under Marcus Brown. But that East, it's just you never know what you're going to get. Right now, Greene County Tech is the team to beat right there, as we saw throughout non-conference play. But that's just a conference that you just never know, and you got to bring it night in and night out.
And again, it seems unfair almost, but it's going to be another 1 or 2 good teams that are not going to make the playoffs. Coming out of the East, man, it's been like that at least the last 3-4 years, where you probably got the number 5 or 6 team coming out of the East that can very well win a first round playoff game, but they didn't get the opportunity because the conference is so deep, and it's going to, I think, again, it's going to be a case where someone is going to get left out, unfortunately, in the playoffs, and like I said, Greene County Tech right now is my team in that conference. But again, Marion had a tough non-conference schedule. Coach Johnson wasn't pulling any strings about getting her girls prepared to this point. And they came out in open conference play, big win over West Memphis, which again, and a West Memphis team that I think a lot of people figured would kind of tail off a little bit when Coach Leak left to go UAPB, but they've seemed to just kind of pick up right where they left off last regular season, man. And they're playing really good ball. They have a win over Bologna this year, which I think was one of the better wins in 5A. And we're talking about a Bologna team that, again, had a tough non-conference schedule as well, but it's going to be right in the thick of things come state tournament time to actually win it. So I think that was a good win for them. Again, Mary Nettleton is another team that's scary. They've had some good non-conference wins as well. So the East, again, is going to be one of those conferences where you can't overlook anybody. And again, that may sound cliche, but I mean, it's a situation where you have to play your best ball to win, because once that last week of regular season comes off and you're a game or 2 back, you can look back at a game during the early part of the conference play and be like, okay, we let that one get away, and they can't afford to do that over in the East.
Looking down, I want to talk. You mentioned Bologna, and I'm definitely going to talk about the Central, but I want to touch real quick on the South, because that's been one of those. Lake Hamilton with 2022 class with Haley Wyrick and all those, Audrey Winfrey, was it Jenny Higginbotham, that trio, plus with that 2022 class that just tore through the South for their 3 varsity years. Then they were really young after that class graduated, struggled. Then last year were one of the darlings and really just surprised a lot of people and made a semifinal run. In that 2023 year, Benton ran away with that conference, but really, again, for the most part, post-COVID, it has been Lake Hamilton's. Mm-hmm. Do you see really anybody? I know Benton. They've got kind of I think they're just a little bit over 500 right now. But do you see really anybody challenging Lake Hamilton for that South crown?
I think if anyone's going to challenge them, it would be Lakeside. But again, it depends on which Lakeside team shows up. I think they play each other this week, if I'm not mistaken. In Lake Hamilton, they got off to a slow start this year, but they've slowly started to get better. I think they've won 5 or 6 in a row coming in to this week. But I think Sheridan, depending on again what team we see out of Sheridan can challenge them. Ben, I think, is undefeated in the conference, but I think they're 3-0 in the conference play. But right now, I think Lake Hamilton is the class of that conference. And until, we see it, I don't think anyone's going to be able to catch him.
Then you talked about Bologna a second ago, and, they've got a load of young talent. They've been known really over the past few years. You date back to Sidney Middleton's freshman year. They've been moving freshmen up, and also Maddie Mannion, which, Maddie and Sidney are one of the best backcourts in the state, regardless of classification. But like you said, have had some struggles. They went and played in Texas at the Sandra Meadows Classic. They do that just about every single year. So they really challenge, Jeremy Simon's always going to challenge his team. But Little Rock Christian has really owned that, really, not just that conference, obviously, because they're just getting into conference play, but the non-conference schedule is very impressive. Whitley Rogers is playing out of her mind, put up 37 points the other night. It's just been absolutely crazy. But, a team that's a little bit of a sleeper to me, and that is BB. They play Bologna this week. Love the way Bailey Barton plays. That's a team that started slow last year. They were really young, and then they picked it up in the second half of the season. They made a state run. I think they got the 4 seed. I know they made a run to the state tournament. So that's really kind of my dark horse, I would say, in the Central is, and we're going to find out, I think, a lot about this BB team. They came up short against a really good 2A Quitman team a couple of weeks ago. But I think that we're going to find out a good bit about them when they square off against Bologna this week.
You mentioned Bailey Barton. That's a name that I think, we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming years. And you're talking about a young lady that can shoot the ball. I think she hit 9 threes a game or two ago. I think was I guess a school record maybe. But I was introduced to her doing AAU basketball. I went and saw her at a tournament, and I'm like, okay, this young lady can play. I didn't realize that she would be at BB. And honestly, until this past offseason. And to see what she's doing is not really surprising because I saw it doing AAU. And it's just really that's transferred over now into varsity ball. But I'm with you. BB is a team that's going to challenge, the Bolognians and the Little Rock Christians in that conference. They're tough to beat at home as well. You mentioned I think the loss they had to Quitman. I think that may have been in the Badger Classic, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. I think it was the championship game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
And that's a very good Quitman team that's undefeated right now. So BB is going to be a tough out for anyone. And I'm with you. It wouldn't shock me to see them sneak into that 1 or 2 spot over in the Central. It's definitely a team you can't overlook. That's for sure.
Looking down as we get to the smaller classifications, I know that many are talking about, and not to say that it's not warranted, but I know that kind of who is the top 4A team for many people, and it seems that DeQueen and PA, probably because of their undefeated records, are really the ones that are only being discussed. But then you look at Nashville, and of course Nashville dating back to 2021, 2022, that 22 year when they won that state championship. If we've talked about up to this point about the coaches that really challenge their kids, and Paul Dean, he schedules as hard as anybody. I talked to him about this. You and I have talked about this more times than I can count. He just really puts it on them to make sure that they are prepared, not just for their conference, but also for of course the state tournament runs. And I know that you look at their record and you're kind of like, okay, well, that's probably not one that warrants like a top 15, top 10 ranking. I personally think that even though they're not, I know that they've got 2 key injuries, I think right now. One of them, one of the Scribner girls is supposed to come back, but I know that there's one that's out for the season. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like that is probably a top. they're definitely in the conversation for a top 15 team. I've got them at number 12 overall. And I certainly, if they're at their healthiest, they're definitely the best team in 4A to me. But again, I'm not trying to say that DeQueen or PA does not deserve to be in that conversation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to. We thought that we were going to get a DeQueen Nashville matchup last Friday, but Mother Nature got in the way of that. Mm-hmm. But that's just a fun conversation to have because the DeQueen and Nashville are going to play each other in the regular season. We won't get to see PA against either one of those teams until the postseason.
Nashville is a team, and then the crazy thing about what they're doing is, with Kennedy Scribner coming back soon and Larry Bennett being out for the year, those are two starters that were missing for the better part of the year, and they're still competing with, I guess, a tough non-conference schedule. They went out and played Greenwood, North Little Rock Central, played in the Little Rock Christian Classic, played in the Conway tournament in November, and they've played well. They've been in just about every game they played. But and I talked with Coach Dean about if they were healthy, they would be literally, in my opinion, probably top 5 overall.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah,
and again, I saw them play Central the other Friday. And they literally probably led that game for about 3.5 quarters. Central made a run. They ended up going to overtime and Central won. But Nashville, Coach Dean has done a tremendous job, and I tell him all the time, man, you not only look like your dad, but you kind of coach like him too. We have those Pine Bluff roots back in the day. But man, they're scary. And at the Central game, Coach Yarbrough was actually at that game, watching from the stands. I would love to know what she was going through her mind just watching, because they play extremely hard, man. You're not going to find too many teams that play harder than the way they play. And this has been going on since he's been a coach.
Yep.
And
for those that don't know, he coached under Clay Reeves for many years, won state championships. So he's not only the son of a coach, as you mentioned, but coaching under him certainly helped too.
He literally gets everything he can out of those ladies, and like I said, when Kennedy Scribner gets back, and I'm thinking she'll be back in the next few weeks or so, that just makes them that much better, than what they are. And once they get the postseason play, it's going to be scary, man. PA and the Queen right now, and deservedly so, are 1-2 in 4A. They've played their way to that spot. But again, Nashville is a team that, come postseason time, they're going to probably be, in my opinion, one of the favorites, if not the favorite in 4A, especially if Scribner gets instituted back well with that team. But they're scary, man. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm glad you met, because I couldn't remember. So Karsten was the one that put up 30 the other night, Karsten Scribner. I knew that one of them was coming back, but it's Kennedy that was hurt. So anytime we get twins, man, it always throws me off. Or sisters of any kind, it tends to throw me off.
Speaking of that, the Queen game, I would love to see, because the Lyle sisters are at the Queen, which were at Nashville.
A lot of connections there, because Brett Burgess, their stepdad, was Paul's assistant and did a great job. And Paul will tell you, Brett did a phenomenal job with those junior high teams. I think two or three of them in a row went undefeated, and that's a big reason why they're able to continue to do what they do. And a lot of connections there with the Lyle girls that are both, of course, going to Arkansas Tech. And Coach Burgess, he's done a phenomenal job. And also Paul Dean was briefly at DeQueen as the head coach before he came. So all kinds of connections there. So it's only fitting that they're two of the top teams in 4A. And also, in 4A, I love what Brooklyn continues to do. Mitchell Weber, he's I've said it many times, he's one of the up and coming coaches in the state. I think he actually just turned 30 and has already had an immense amount of success. And shout out to Evan Polsgrove, which to me, Eric is one of the better multi-sport athletes in the state. I think it was over 1,000. She just hit 1,000 career points in basketball with the 21-point performance over Pocahontas. I believe that she also has 1,000 career kills in volleyball, over 1,000, one of those stats. For a Brooklyn team that won 3 consecutive state championships and went to like 6 or 7 in a row, whatever it was. So, want to give a shout out to her, one of the better multi-sport athletes that's probably not talked about, Evan Polsgrove. And also talking about, before we move on down to the even smaller classifications. The 4A7, we've talked about that conference in football, as it's been referred to as the SEC of Class 4A through the years, and just how deep. Now, I know it might not be in football what it once was as of recent, but that has been essentially just Nashville's to lose. I don't think Nashville's lost a conference game in like 3 years, but it is a little bit deeper this year. What do you think of? We talked about DeQueen. Arkadelphia is much better. Camden Fairview's got a few studs. I know Magnolia got off to a good start. I think they actually had a key injury or two as well. But while it is still Nashville's to lose until somebody says otherwise, it is much deeper than what we are accustomed to seeing.
Arkadelphia has gotten off to a tremendous start, man. And the crazy part about it, I remember seeing this Arkadelphia team a couple of years ago in Blytheville during state tournament, and they had a lot of young pieces. Well, those kids are now seniors, if I'm not mistaken. And so what they're doing right now, I kind of saw coming then. TT Tates of the world, they've got a really, really good team. I think they've got maybe Fairview this week, if I'm not mistaken, which will be a good game. They have a stud sophomore that's getting offers from somewhere everywhere. I don't pronounce Mimi Fusler.
I think it's Fusler, but we're on the right track. I just don't know if I pronounce it.
I didn't know if I pronounced the name right or not, but she's getting offers from somewhere everywhere. And so Fairview's is definitely on the rise there. Like I said, but again, like you mentioned, until someone knocks Nashville off, it's still Nashville's to lose. But the Queen is going to have a lot to say about that this year as well. But again, the Magnolia team, I mentioned they've got off to a good start, but I think they did have a injury recently, and I know they had a kid that I think ended up transferring to Lafayette County, maybe it's one of the smaller schools, if I'm not mistaken. But Magnolia has played well this year, so they'll be in the mix as well. But they're much deeper, like you mentioned, man, than what has been in the past, I believe.
So in 3A, I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. I'm not unbelievable. Obviously, I know what Dover's been doing. They have looked really, really well. They were really solid last year, and they added, of course, as a Katie Keister that they added, I believe this year. I'm pretty sure that's the name I'm thinking of. Sitting at 18-0 right now. Now that was another game. They were supposed to play Baptist Prep on Friday that we got robbed. I don't want to say robbed of. At least we have to be a little bit more patient for, I guess, is the more proper term. But I bring up Baptist Prep because Dover's currently tied with the Lady Eagles for first place in the 3A5. Then you've got Dumas that's 16-1. I think that loss is to West Side, which we're going to sing praises for here in a second. A phenomenal 1A team. Lamar, which has been to 2 state finals in went to back-to-back in 2022 and 23, sitting at 15-2. Melbourne's 14-2. Elkins out of 3A1 is 14-3. What do you make of this? So, is it really just kind of seem like Dover's to lose right now, especially when you think they beat 6A schools and some upper class? Is it really kind of theirs to lose right now, or maybe do you look at like a Dumas or some other teams as well, or possibly a Lamar? I'm
going to say that 3A is probably the deepest classification overall in the state. I mean, honestly, I know Dover is undefeated right now, and they're really good. That win over Bentonville was a big win, one of the better wins I think in the state as far as a smaller team beating a bigger squad. But 3A is so deep. Now you mentioned Dover, obviously Lamar, Bergman, Mountain View, Melbourne, Dumas. Even the McGee's of the world. I think maybe 13, 14-2 teams like Drew Central kind of goes.
Drew Central, yeah, another one.
It's just so many teams that could easily be in that top 12, and once tournament time hits, it's going to be competitive games. Right now Dover is definitely at the top of their heat, but again, Lamar Valley Springs, another one that comes to mind. Falk
is one that I'm kind of because they were like 43-0 last year, and I know they haven't started undefeated or anything. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of teams don't, but that's one out. I think that sometimes people forget the way that Mo Williams plays. I love that the way he subs in. He keeps like a 9-10 rotation of just in and out, and that's been a very consistent squad too over the past few years.
You just hit the foul. Foul kind of reminds me a little bit. This year I know they lost a few key pieces, but they're still right there. Falk. You mentioned Baptist Prep, another team. That's going to challenge Dover. I love to see when those two hook up, man. But 3A is literally, I think, the deepest class in the state. If I had to put my money on a team right now, it would probably be Dover. Way Logan Young has played, this year. She's just been off the charts. But again, Lamar is not far behind him. Lamar, I'm never going to bet against Bergman. That conference that they're in is ridiculous. Another team that I think can make noise that's probably not being talked about a lot, and I think you mentioned Mountain View. It's so deep, and that's the toughest. It's always the toughest class for me to rank, honestly. Yeah. Because there's so many teams. I just have those 6 spots, man.
3A, and we were Cabo and I were talking about this during football, man. Softball, football, 3A, it always seems to be the widest field. And when we say the deepest conference, we don't necessarily mean that all these teams could beat 5 and 6A schools on a consistent basis. But when you talk about just the most wide open field, and part of that too is because you've got more teams and all those different things. But it seems like 3A, no matter the sport, it is the hardest to pick when you think about 5, 6, 7, or maybe even up to 10 teams sometimes.
It's the same way on the boys' side. It's so you got so many teams, man, that's going to be in the mix. And I promise you're going to have a team that no one is literally talking about. Probably me and you not even talking about, that'll end up being in the Final Four, Elite Eight, something like that, man. And you'd be like, okay, this team should saw this coming, but it's not going to be surprising because 3A is so tough, man. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. No doubt. And looking at going down to 2A, perfect segue is you've got so many. I know Quitman, they're the hot team right now as far as, being 17-0 unbeaten. You got a Riverside team that 2025 class, Eric, for Riverside. You think about what they've done in softball. Of course, they've been great in basketball. They're at 20-3. Mm-hmm. Sloan Hendricks is 21-2. I like that conference with ICC and Tuckerman as well. Mm-hmm. Acorn, which however you want to pronounce it. I think it's actually Acorn, but 17-5. Of course, the 2A5 conference. How many teams have been? Of course, you've got the back-to-back defending state champion Mount Vernon and Enola in the 2A5, but then you've also got Bigelow that they're either sitting at 11-7. They've had a state tournament appearance over the past few years. Conway Christian went a couple of years ago, and they're sitting at 7-3. That's probably the conference you look at in 2A when you're talking about just what you were mentioning a second ago about one of those teams that we might not expect it. I think that if the Conway Christians of the world, the Mount Vernon and Enolas, maybe with what their record is right now, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know where they'll be at the end. But there's just so much more to figure out. And you also look at the 2A7, you've got an unbeaten Cutter Morning Star team, a 16-2. And Will Stewart, he won the state championship with Norfolk in 2022, then went to Russellville for a year. He's really got Dirks rolling. 2A8, Poe and Parker's Chapel, Magnet Cove are all off to hot starts. But, one thing I am looking for with this Quitman team, last year at the start of February, they were 22-4. Then they lost 6 of their last 8. So while I'm sure, Coach Hooten's been doing this for a long time, while I'm sure that he has done everything that he can to make sure they don't look back, I know that that's probably in the back of their mind in terms of, okay, we know that we let some things get away from us last year. We're trying to not let that happen again.
They've played like they've come out with something to prove, which I think what you just mentioned, them losing the way they kind of finished the year off. I do think, and they may not admit it, but it's got to be in the back of their mind. Okay, look, we had a chance last year. We were one of the better teams in the class. And, they just kind of tailed off toward the end of the year. And I think it kind of cost them. Well, they haven't, allowed that to deter what they've done this year. I mean, they've been so impressive, man. Again, beating BB in that tournament over there, man. But they went through with a business-like approach, which is kind of what you want to see at this point in time of the year anyway. But they played extremely well. But one of the teams, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, that I'm really, anxious to see get going, and that's Bigelow. I saw their team play a couple times last year, and they've got talent. They've actually had a tough non-conference schedule as well. But I think that's a team that's going to have a lot to say, once postseason play hits. But again, right now I think it's really Quitman and then everyone else, at least from what I've seen, this year. And again, anything's possible right now. But yeah, Quitman, I think is the class of that class right now.
Well, and one that I didn't even mention, Barton and the job that Ryan Court's doing. Man, I mean, You know, we knew that Maya Wilson, when her freshman year, we knew when she was putting up just all these crazy stats that they might have something cooking there. And he comes in and, a very established coach, a good friend of ours, and just a very established coach. And what a job. Last year they made the regional tournament for the first time. You might have to help me on this. Regional for like first time in 20, 30 years or something like that.
It's been the first time in maybe 40 years
or even longer. Yeah. So that is, I mean, and he's brought some kids in and I mean, they're just really gelling. And I know that, they got a great backcourt. I mean, they just got a great team all the way around. They're sitting at 16-1. So definitely, I wanted to make sure I mentioned them because the Lady Bears.
I literally, it is crazy you mentioned that. I literally just watched one of their older games, and me and Ryan, we kind of talk, just about every other week or whatnot. But I told him I'm definitely getting over there soon, over there to just catch those ladies in person. I think the only team that's beating them is Stuttgart. Stuttgart's got a pretty good team as well, but they've just been blowing through teams, and with like I said, Maya Wilson, and then getting Kyria Jackson to come in, and which has been a huge boost for that team. They're definitely. I don't see anyone in their conference staying within 25 points of them right now, and like I said, they'll get challenged once they get to regionals. But and again, he's scheduled pretty tough out of conference games as well. He would travel over to Northwest Arkansas to play the Parises of the world just to challenge these ladies, and they've done a good job of navigating where they are right now as a program. He's done such a tremendous job over there, man. I mean, I don't think anyone saw him doing what he's been able to do with that program, in just a short time he's been there. I mean, it's been tremendous, and he deserves all the credit in the world for turning that team around, man. It's been amazing to watch.
Yeah, a lot of fun to watch in Phillips County. That's always been a football school through the course of a lot of the kids now, of course, don't remember that, but the Frank McClellan was before their time, the Frank McClellan days. But yeah, I mean, one of the greatest football dynasties, and maybe the greatest football dynasty in the history of the state, and definitely making some noise and grow. And the boys team's playing really well. I think they're like 10-3 or 10-4, something like that. So boys are doing pretty well too. So. And then last on the girls' side in Class 1A. So the past 3 years we've had, I mean, it's kind of been like, okay, who's going to win it, Mammoth Spring or Norfolk? Both of those teams, they graduated. Massive 2024 classes. Of course, Keely Blanchard highlighted the Norfolk 24 class, Bryn Washam for Mammoth Spring. But this year, Eric, I mean, so I want to talk about the 1A8 real quick. Lafayette County, Rod Briggs, shout out to him. Great dude. He's got the boys and the girls rolling. Taylor, also both Lafayette County and Taylor have 13 wins each coming into this week. But I think when you really just look at Class 1A, you can't look much further than what Greers Ferry Westside has done. 22-3. They've beaten Harrison, Bryant, Cabot. They hung with PA. They hung with Nettleton. Beat a really good Dumas that, as I said, gave Dumas its only loss. Also played North Little Rock, stayed within about 20 points of that game. Rural Special has also been really solid in their conference. But Eric, you think about, I know they added Addie Overturf, who's an exceptional multi-sport athlete from Searcy, added some Concord girls. You already had a team that was talented, especially on the girls' sports and multiple of them at Westside. Then you added those pieces, and they pretty much just become it seems unstoppable at the 1A level.
they're right now. They're probably the closest thing you're going to get right now in Arkansas, outside of Farmington and Conway, of being just a single dominant team. I mean, literally, and again, shout out to Quitman and Dover, not to forget about those teams, and Queen, PA, undefeated programs, but Westside to be a 1A school and to do what they've done against bigger classification teams. You mentioned the Nettletons of the world, Harrison, North Little Rock, Bryant. I think they may have beaten Hot Spring Lakeside. I'm not sure.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
And they've been doing it convincingly, honestly. And they played PAs tough. That team is phenomenal. And I think they played rural earlier. I think they beat them by maybe 18-19. And this is a good rural special team as well. But yeah, when you think of 1A this year, particularly, you start with Westside. Earl is another team I think that's going to be their backcourt combo that they have. I mean, you're probably. I mean, you got good backcourts in Arkansas, but those two guards, Jaden Maples and Journey Jefferson, are two. That 1-2 punch, man. That what they did last year in postseason play was. You may not see that in them. I mean, they on a nightly, they're averaging 35, 36 a game between both of them. And just those two alone gives Earl a shot against anyone. They're right there. Martree brings a lot of experience back. Ziona Anderson, I think she's a 1,000-point scorer over at Martree. So I think those four in particular are right now, along with the Taylors and Lafayette Counties of the world. Are going to be, talked about all year. But like I said, Westside, man, that team has been tremendous all year. And I don't see them slowing down, to be quite honest with you.
No, I've debated on putting them in, and I think they're certainly warranted to be in my top 25. I've debated it. I would say they're a top 30 team in the state overall. I think that's certainly fair to say. And man, they're just, they are looking very impressive. So, then you go over to the boys' side at Jonesboro. We had a feeling that what they had, they didn't have a bad year by any means last season, but compared to Jonesboro standards, that's just not what people are used to. Right. And you think about the 2022 class that especially the 22 and 23 class, the what all of those guys brought to the table. You're going to have those down years to where you're just trying to get some things figured out. And even Coach Swift said at media days that he's not 100. I don't want to misquote him, but kind of paraphrasing, he wasn't 100% sure that everybody was really fully bought in last year, and that was kind of what he had mentioned. But this year they're playing stifling defense again. I mean, that's the West Swift method right there. I mean, they're just playing incredible defense. They're unbeaten against in-state competition. But also look at that Springdale Red Dogs team, Eric. They were the fourth. You covered all of the King Cotton Classic. They're out of all the Arkansas teams that have played, and there are only four have won that whole entire tournament, and Springdale came out on top. Isaiah Seeley just was phenomenal in that. I mean, I was actually talking to Zach Arns, great friend of mine, their play-by-play guy, earlier as we record on this Sunday evening, and that was one thing that he and I talked about. We were just going down the line, player, from top to bottom. They're up there with the most talented as far as the most, and there's a few that you could put in this conversation, but as far as the most depth, when you think about adding a Jackson Conley from Harbor, I really like what this Red Dog team. I think that's going to be a very, very. I think we both have them at number 2 right now, but that's one that I have been ultra impressed with.
When you see them, they look like a college team with the size that they have, man. And you mentioned Jackson Conley coming over from Harbor. DJ Hudson from Fayetteville came over. We talk about that's a 6'7" forward. You had Malik Sosa come in from Florida, a 6'3", 6'4" guard that can do different things, man. Of course, you pair those three guys with Isaiah Seeley, Arkansas, signee, man, and Cy Bates, who's been huge this year for this Springdale team, man. And during that King Cotton, man, they played and looked the part of a nationally ranked team. I don't know if they're ranked in any polls right now, but they played the part. They looked like they belonged on that national stage. And then, particularly that first game against Westminster, Florida, who has two of the better players in the nation in their class with Alex Lowe. I think he's going to Florida. He's a senior. And then they have Alex Costanzo, that's a junior, who's being recruited by everybody. But Springdale pretty much handled them easily, on that first night. And then, of course, they navigated their way and then win the tournament. But yeah, that team in particular, and they're just getting better because I don't think they may just not be starting to get their team healthy, because DJ Hudson didn't play at all in King Cotton. He was there, but he didn't play. But they're starting to get healthy now, which is scary because of what they've been able to do without some of the pieces that they've had this year. And like I said, with them, Jonesboro again, Swift, that team plays defense better than anyone in Arkansas. I don't care who we're talking about. That team plays defense better than anyone. So those two, we got, like I said, 1 and 2 overall this year. But I think once, Brian's going to have something to say once they get healthy. Kellen Robson is getting closer and closer to getting back. Even without him, they've played well. And honestly, they probably should have been playing Springdale in the final They had that semifinal game. They led about 6 or 7 in the fourth quarter and just couldn't make shots over the last 4 or 5 minutes and ended up losing that game to a team out of Virginia. But Brian has played well despite not having Kellen in the lineup. And you're talking about a kid that's, signed with Little Rock, averaging 25 a game last year. So when you miss a guy like him, it's gonna show. But they played well in spite of. So I think that's a team that's going to get better as the year progresses. Fayetteville is another one that's really my sleeper in 6A. Coach Stamps does a great job with that team. I love watching them play. They play ball the right way. It's no I guarantee he probably has 4 or 5 guys averaging 9, 10 a game. They share the ball. They just play well together, man. Bentonville's another one that's a sizable team. I think it's going to be able to match up with a Springdale because they can match them on that front line. Coach Pennington's done a great job in his first year there as well. So yes, 6A is going to be interesting, man. But right now, Jonesboro, Springdale, Bryant, Fayetteville, Bentonville, and I think North Little Rock they don't have the size of those previous teams like a Springdale, but North Little Rock is still North Little Rock. It's not you're not going to sleep on a team like that, man. So I'm anxious to see how all that shakes out over the next month and a half with a lot of these in conference games against each other. I think, matter of fact, Fayetteville plays Harbor. Harbor's a team that we hadn't even talked about. With Cortland Muldrew, Hayden Wood, and guys like that. I think they play each other tomorrow night, which would be a big game as well. So 6A is going to be fun, man. I mean, we could say that Springdale and Jonesboro are favorites, but they're going to have some guys chasing after them for sure.
Yeah, along with Harbor. So you look at Harbor and Central, the defending state champ. Mm-hmm. They both have losing records right now, and I think that is a little bit of it's kind of like we continue to stress strength of schedule, and I think that is a little bit of a mirage when you look at who both teams have played. Oh, sure. I think I do feel a little bit better about maybe saying Central could possibly have a little bit better of a second half. I think that they've been kind of trying to figure. Shelby Lewis was already on staff; he knew this team really well, but they also lost a lot from that 2024 class. If you think, it started with Honor Boateng that's now at Missouri. So that 2024 class, losing them also with the coaching change, I feel like that both of these teams. Now I'm not 100% sure either one is going to necessarily compete for a 6A conference crown, like either one of their conference crowns or anything. But I do feel like that both could look a lot better than the losing records that they currently have right now.
Oh, no doubt. And you speak of Central, I think they got a young team that's now, again, as the year goes on, they're going to be a whole lot better than they were, a month ago. And you mentioned they both have sub 500 records, but again, that's kind of misleading because of who they played. Harbor's, I think, probably 4 or 5 of their losses have probably been to out-of-state teams. Central, had several out-of-state losses as well. But again, I think Central, again, they have championship DNA in them. It's not like they don't know how to win, and they've got still have some kids on that team. The Luke Moores, the Clay Blairs of the world that know how to win games. So I think they're going to be a team again that no one's going to want to see come playoff time because of what they've done in the past and who they still have. And Harbor's the same way. They got to the semis last year, and had it not been for Central, they would have played in the state title game. You're never going to bet against a team that has 2 guys like Cortland Muldrew and Hayden Wood on the team, man. So I agree 100%. Those 2 in particular, can easily, I can see easily get into the semis, depending on the matchup and how they come out and play.
Then in 5A, we'll go ahead and start with the South, and South has kind of been the superior conference throughout the past few years. You think about 2023, you had an all-South conference state championship. Then last year, Benton made it and fell. Actually, it was past 2 years you've had it because it was Pine Bluff and Benton last year. So the past 2 years you've had an all 5A South state championship. I know Lake Hamilton losing Ty Robinson, that was a massive hit for them, and they've kind of taken a little bit of a dip here as of recent. But you've got a Lakeside team that I think still has a lot to prove, but has started off really well. Hot Springs has been playing pretty well with Josh Hayes, his first year there. But right now, and Pine Bluff, I know that they've really struggled out of the gate with what they're having to replace. But that is still a very loaded conference, but it is definitely led by Benton for sure.
Oh, for sure, definitely. And Benton, I think they've probably had 2 of the best wins in a 24-hour span, they beat Brown. And they beat Brown earlier this year. They beat Brown without Terrion Burgess on a Friday night. They turn around and play Springdale the next day on a Saturday and beat Springdale by a point, although Springdale didn't have Isaiah Sealy for that game. But Ben definitely is the toast of that conference. They brought everyone back from last year. I know Elam Shelby has been injured. But again, Benton, they're going to be a tough out period, and they're the favorite, to be quite honest with you, to get back to the title game. And considering, what they brought back and how they played so far, Coach Hendricks done a great job with that team. And you mentioned Lake Hamilton. They have taken somewhat of a dip, and you're going to do that when you lose a guy like Ty, who averages 25 to 30 a game last year, whatever it was. So that's going to happen. But like I said, Hot Springs has been playing well. Another team that intrigues me out of the South is Sheridan. With Coach Scott and those guys, they've actually had a really, really good first half of the season. I think Hot Springs got them in one of their early conference games, but that's another team I think is going to actually compete for one of those fourth playoff spots. Them, Whitehall, I think has been playing well. They're young, but they've been playing well as well. So, but like I said, Ben, and I think it's everyone else after that in the South.
I want to take a look at the East real quick because you've got is it Sammy Lewis? His name's going at Marion.
Yeah, Marion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I knew it was Sam. I couldn't remember if it was Lewis. His name, star Jonesboro guard. I know all about it. His name was former Jonesboro star guard. His name was slipping my mind. First year coach there. Also Marcus Brown. That was previously a West Memphis legend. Played professional basketball. Played at Murray State. He was there. Left in 2021. And the West Memphis squad over the past few years, has struggled really the last 3 seasons, and they're off to a really good start. Valley View's playing really well. Nettleton. So just like we talked about on the girls' side, just a night in and night out, a brutal draw pretty much no matter who you're playing because everybody comes to play no matter the record. Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get a team or two out of the conference that's deserving of a playoff spot that's not going to make it. I mean, you mentioned Marion, and the thing what Sammy's been able to do with Marion is amazing because they lost some key pieces last year, and then Lindell Buckingham transferred out before the year started. So that's you're talking about an all-state player that left, but then for them to come back and beat some really, really good teams this year, I think. Matter of fact, I think they were the only one to, if I'm not mistaken, beat Springdale from Arkansas. I think they went up and beat Springdale. I think it may have been in the Bulldog Classic or whatnot. But yeah, that Marion team is really good. And West Memphis, Marion just did get by them. I think it was a 57-55 game. West Memphis had a chance to tie it or win it late. But they played so much better than what they've been in the past. But that's that conference. Nettleton has been super all year. Valley View has been super all year. I think those two teams have played. They played in the finals of the NEA Invitational in a dogfight as well. So they've got a couple more times to play each other in conference, man. So that's going to be a conference again where you're going to have two teams that are deserving of a playoff spot that won't make it. And it's just how tough that league is.
And looking over at the West, we had it's no shock what we saw with Harrison and Mountain Home at the hangar the other night. Just another instant classic that we had between those. It was won in the final 2 seconds of the game on a go-ahead. I think it was Hayden Martin, if I'm not mistaken, that hit that layup. But go-ahead layup there with 2 seconds left. And the West is very tough to, Harrison really is ever since they made that semifinal run in 2000 and lost to Lake Hamilton in 2023, they seem to kind of be the team to beat. Mountain Home is always a really tough out. As we mentioned, the Hangars is so tough to play, and we know what the girls have been doing. Also, Russellville last year, they got off to that really good start and they had a key injury and things kind of fell the last 2 seasons, for Russellville in the back half as when things have really kind of gotten away from them. But then you also look at an Alma team that last year started, they didn't start off so great, but then played really well in the back half. And I think that they're due for possibly that again. Mm-hmm. So when you look at, the Russellvilles of the world, the Almas, Mountain Homes, right now to me, it's probably Harrison's to lose. And I think that many would agree with that. But for the most part, this conference has just been so tough to gauge to me over the past few years.
I told Coach Staller this a couple of days ago. Me and him talked to Harrison's head coach, and we both agreed that the West is probably the toughest conference top to bottom. We talk about the number 1 team all the way down to the number 8 team. You know, you mentioned Alma. Alma ended up winning the conference last year. Every team in the conference out, I think, except 7 of the 8 teams all have winning records. And the only one that doesn't have a winning record is Van Buren, and they finished 2nd in the conference last year. And Van Buren is not a bad team, you know. But then you talk when you bring, you know, the Almas and the Harrisons and the Mountain Home, but then you bring in Farmington, which has been played phenomenal ball all year long. You know, and they're going to be a tough out. You know, I think a lot of people believe they would take a step back once Lane Taylor left. And, you know, when you lose a guy like that, you're not going to replace him. But they've kind of did it as a committee. You know, different guys putting in work every night, different leading scorers, you know, Press Taylor, Maddox Teeter, guys like that. So Farmington's a tough out. But that's going to be a conference, really. You know, again, Alma, Farmington, and Harrison. And again, we saw the Mountain Home game with Harrison, man. I think it's going to be like that pretty much all year. Russellville, another one. You know, that's you're going to have these tight games that are going to come down to, like, you know, 2 or 3 possessions, you know, late in the fourth quarter that's going to decide it. You know, and that's what makes that side of 5A so interesting, you know, from east to west, because they're similar conferences. You know, they're both from top to bottom are really tough games each night, man, and that's not going to change. It's going to be like that every Tuesday and Friday night this year, all year long, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I completely forgot about I had a brain fart there for a second and completely had forgotten that, even though we just talked about the Farmington girls a little while ago, I completely forgot that they were added to that West Conference from Class 4A from the previous cycle. So, yeah, that just makes it even deeper. Mm-hmm. Then looking at the Central, it's hard if both teams stay healthy. It's hard to imagine anybody but Little Rock Christian or Maumelle coming. I think we're due for kind of like how Parkview and Maumelle were in previous years. How really that conference came down to those two. That's where it is to me with Little Rock Christian. You know, even though Little Rock Christian went through a coaching change, they really just have not skipped a beat. Played another really tough schedule, and they took Bryant to the wire the other night.
That team, you know. Naturally, J.J. Andrews is going to get the bulk of the attention, and rightfully so. He's one of the best, you know, juniors in the nation, you know. But that's a team where he's got plenty of help, you know, and he trusts those guys. You know, I've seen them play twice this year, and it's obvious with the way he plays. He has the utmost trust in guys like, you know, K.D. Hicks to come in and put up big numbers, man. The Nelson brothers. You know, and Coach Wademan's done a great job, you know, getting all those guys to kind of buy in and know their roles. Yeah, JJ is the guy, and rightfully so. But others on that team, you know, have stepped up and put in work, man. And they're playing as good as anyone in Arkansas. Like I said, the Bryant game, they led for a bulk of that game, to be quite honest with you, man. And we're right there. But them and Maumelle has had some big wins. They I think split with Brian earlier this year. But those two teams in the Central, man. I mean, I think they're going to play early, if I'm not mistaken. But
I think they play a week from so we're recording on a Sunday night. It'll release Monday, so a week from today, essentially. I'm pretty sure it's next Monday or next week sometime.
And that's going to be probably end up being like a standing room only type of game, to be kind of much. I mean, just how good those two teams are. And they literally, you know, unless something crazy happens, they'll finish 1-2 in any order in that conference, man. And I think, you know, the last two playoff spots, you know, kind of be up for grabs with the Bolognas and the Catholics of the world, man. So it makes for some intriguing ball over the next month and a half.
And then looking at 4A, I'll go ahead and say Mills they're a top 5 team in the state, no question, as what we've seen right now. Just looking at they're 18-1. They beat Central 18-1. They beat Central twice. They beat Conway, beaten Bryant. Their only loss is to Benton that both of us have at number 3. So just, you know, I'm not shocked that Mills is in this position because they're a 4A contender every year. Mm-hmm. I just don't know, ET, that I saw it this quick because they're typically one of those that maybe start off a little bit slow. Mm-hmm. And then now granted, over the past few years, they've been really young. They've had to overcome some injuries. I know in some years they've had to wait on some football guys to come in. But they are typically by about this time is when that team over the past few years has really begun to heat up. Mm-hmm. But they have been hot since the ball first went in the air in November, really.
I think honestly, this is probably the team, and Coach Coop, he may admit this and may not admit this, but they've been so young. I remember him telling me a couple of years ago, man, I just wait till these guys become seniors, and meaning Zaylen Rowland and Anthony, although Hester is I think a junior, but Zaylen Rowland and Joseph Bales and those guys, when they become seniors, he said they're going to be nice, and he would look and smile and wink or whatnot. But what they've done. I didn't expect them to come out as hot as they've been this year. I did expect them to be in the position that they are, which is number 1 in 4A. But 18-1, after 19 games, I don't know if even Coop himself saw that coming, man. And honestly, they probably hadn't played their best ball yet.
Right.
And that's a scary thought because of what they've done already. They're like I said, they're number 1 in 4A. Forest City is hot on their trails, and this is a Forest City team that's pretty doggone good. So they're going to give them a run for their money. But right now, it's Mills, I think, and no disrespect to anyone else, but it's Mills and everyone else. But, Forest City's not far behind, but just what Mills has done, man, every night it's been, nothing so amazing.
Yeah, Forest City's certainly up there. They're sitting at 14-2. They didn't play last week, so they've gotten by the time that they do play again. I was actually looking at it earlier. I think it would be about exactly 13, 14 days. So may have to shake off a little bit of rust, but I definitely expect them to continue to click. Then you look around the rest of 4A. Huntsville sitting at 14-5. You also got a Jonesboro West Side at 10-3. Dardanelle at 15-3. Joe T. Robinson, which I know in past years has been known to really heat up in the back half. But going back to Mills, they got those split conference, the 4A5, the North and the South. And looking at the South, that's where you've had the teams perform at the highest in terms of the win-loss records, because you think of Mills at 18-1. You've got Fountain Lake at 15-4, Bauxite at 14-3. And then also kind of a sneaky Eastham team at 17-6 that has a win over Hot Springs. So, and actually, if I believe Mills actually plays Eastham and Hall, I think, is another one that I didn't mention in there. They've got Hall and Eastham this week. It's another quality team. So, Mills, if you can say it, if this is the most appropriate way, this coming up week could possibly be the most challenged that they will be. One of the weeks that they'll be the most challenged as far as the rest of the regular season.
Oh, I agree 100%. When you mentioned Eastham, that's a team that again, one of those groups that are getting better as the year progresses. Manu Patel has done a great job. I think it's his third year with the team. He's got some kids over there that you're not going to hear a whole lot about, but until you see them play, you can be like, okay, this is what he means by this kid being this type of player. It's a big week for them. Like I said, Mills, they're again, like you mentioned, if you can say they're going to be challenged, it'll be this week. Below the two teams, again, Robinson Eastham played twice already, and both were close games. Robinson ended up winning. But yeah, this is going to be a big week, if we can say that for Mills anyway, just to see where the other teams are and how they stack up against them in conference play.
Then looking at 3A, you've got a very hungry Bergman team. They're currently sitting at 20-2, and I bring them up because they've been to the past 2 3A finals, and they've come up short in both. Of course, man, that one that they had with Manila a couple of years ago, I know that sucked for them to come out on the losing end, but just what a incredible performance by both teams. And they played really tough against CAC last year. I was a little bit, of course, I was more so watching that one as a fan since I'm a CAC alumnus, but I was very very impressed with, Bo Martin's a great coach, and he put some great talent on the floor. I know that they don't have Walker Patton anymore, and, who's one of the state's, just most consistent scorers that we had seen, particularly in recent memory. But, they're just playing really well. Also in their conference, Melbourne has played some good ball. You look at the 3A1, Lincoln's 14-2, Elkins is 16-3. Subiaco Academy had a good season last year and very quietly, and they're 12-3 again. Also, the Lamar boys, we expected them to be really good. They're 11-3. And then, of course, you look down there in Southeast Arkansas, the Dumas Bobcats are another one that just continue year in and year out. They still have a Reddick playing for it. It seems like the entire Reddick that Coach Harris has coached the entire Reddick family. He has coached all 3 Reddick boys when you think of Mike, Tommy, and now Billy, who is a senior. Of course, on that state championship team, you had, I guess, Mike was a junior, Billy was a sophomore. And then maybe it was either way, they were all on that 22 team together. Yeah. So you still got a Reddick that is on that team, carries a great GPA, a great player as well. But, the Dumas Bobcats, both the girls and the boys, you always got to put them in the mix.
Like I mentioned, 3A boys and girls are for me personally, the toughest to rank because the class is so deep, man. You mentioned Dumas. They hadn't played well the last weekend or two. They're missing their big 6'5" guys inside. But again, that's a team that I don't worry about. They're going to get it together. Trust me. But you mentioned Dumas, Melbourne's of the world. I love that Melbourne team. Logan Bailey's done such a good job with that group since he left captain and heading that team. The Bergmans, but even like Osceola, it's a team that no one really, says a lot about this year because of what they lost the previous year, but they've been playing well. Rivercrest always plays well in 3A, but you mentioned Lincoln's of the team. Lincoln is really honestly my sleeper in 3A right now with the way they've been playing as well. But again, that the class is so deep. You probably have 10 or 11 teams. Honestly, they could probably win it, to be quite honest with you, just depending on how they're playing when postseason play rolls around. But again, Bergman right now is definitely number one. They deserve it. I kind of don't see that slipping at all as we get into postseason play down the line. But again, it wouldn't shock me if someone steps in and kind of knocks them off. But they won't take too many of those. Trust me, in conference play, they're that good.
Then looking down at Class 2A, we'll just kind of go in the order of the conferences of some of the top teams. 2A1, Ozark Catholic is sitting at 21-4. 2A2, Cedar Ridge team 13-3. Now I want to stop there for a sec because I know that there's a kid, Ryland Brown, who has come on the scene in previous seasons, but really this year has been playing lights out. And his stock as an individual prospect just continues to rise. Cody Edgar did a really good job when he was there. That team, I think before he got there, you might have to correct me, they had like 5 wins, I think, before he got there or maybe his first year, and then they ended up making a deep run or two into the postseason. But, man, just talk about, what Ryland Brown brings to the table and just what that Cedar Ridge team does.
Man, the kid exploded as a freshman last year, and again, he's another guy that I saw doing AAU ball before, last year before he played varsity ball. A little bit as a freshman, but that kid is something else. He's a walking double if there is one. And this is night in, night out. 25-12 is routine for him. But you got other guys, Kyle Province, another kid up there that can really play ball. You don't hear a whole lot about. That Cedar Ridge team is really good. They've played that way all year long. And they've done it. The losses that they have, Coach Swift will tell you when I think. Early in the year, just by seeing those guys, he told me, that's Cedar Ridge is going to be a team that's going to be reckoned with, and they've shown that, throughout the first half of the year and going forward. But they're in a tough conference. They're going to be challenged a few times over there with the teams they're going to have playing. But man, Riley Brown is a special kid, man. I know a lot of people use that term special loosely, but it applies to this kid. Trust me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely I see something about him on Twitter or just about every single day. Just the really up and coming, continuous rising star in the state.
Right.
And also 2A3, Riverside 21-5, also Bay 15-6, 2A6. You got England at 14-3. Now a Mariana Lee team that I think probably has a little bit. Now this is a team that I know that. Vernon Wilson is continuing to try to get to that next step. Mariana Lee won a state championship 3-4 years ago under Emmanuel Wade. But I know that ever since Vernon Wilson left, Osceola has been really trying to get Mariana Lee to get back into those deep postseason runs, and they played a really tough non-conference. So I think they are going to challenge for that 2A6 crown. Barton, as we mentioned earlier, they're sitting at 10-4. And then also down in the 2A7, I've been really impressed with Murfreesboro sitting at 10-1. Caddo Hills at 16-4. But I want to focus real quick on this England squad because they were a really heavy favorite throughout last year as well. Trent Morgan was there, won a couple of state championships, and then went to Russellville for a year, comes back. And, this was very similar story to what we were talking about with Quitman on the 2A girls side. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of last February, England comes in 24-2. Now I know that they had I'm not mistaken, a key injury, maybe their leading scorer. Mm-hmm. They lost 3 straight, ended up missing the state tournament, and they fell to Sloan Hendricks in the first round of regionals. And I remember, Eric, I did a radio segment for the state tournament, and it completely just my brain just shut down, and I'm sitting here talking about how England is one of the favorites and this and that. And then I get a text as I was with Westmore and Joe Franklin, like, hey, man, they're not. I'm like, oh, my gosh. That's just how I had in my head because they had played so well throughout the entire year. I just completely forgot about it. But that just goes to show, the teams that they have continued to put on the floor there. And I think they've got another very quality and hungry team that we're seeing from the Lions this year.
They brought pretty much everyone back. I say all the time, they have the best starting five in two-way by far. And they haven't second and they've added some pieces as well. Trace Chatton came over as well to make them even that much better. But yeah, that group, and Trent has them playing the right way. They play together as a team. Every night they're going to have 4 or 5 guys in double figures. And that's how he coaches those guys. They share the ball well. There's no eyes on that team at all. It's not. They don't care who scores as long as they get the W. And they've been super, super impressive this year. And again, I'm waiting for those Mariana games you mentioned with Vernon Wilson over there. They've got the talent. I think it's just been a situation where he's had to get those guys to buy in to his way of coaching. And I think this year, I think their record doesn't show it, but they've had a tough schedule, like you mentioned. But I think they may be a game out behind England right now, and it's without even them playing them. But they're going to be in the mix as well, man. But this England team, like I said, they have a legit argument to be number 1 and 2A right there with Cedar Ridge. To be honest with you, they're that good. I want to say I'm not sure if they're going to be matched up in regionals. Now I'm not sure if they are or not, but just when those teams link up at some point, it's much anticipated. To be honest with you, and me and Trent talked quite a bit about how deep 2A is, and one of the teams he'll mention would be Cedar Ridge. That's a group that he's anxious to see his guys stack up against, but he also knows, man, he's not going to overlook anyone, especially in that division. And considering, how their season ended last year, like you mentioned, just this is why they match up in regionals where they didn't get a chance to even go, to state, which was tough. And so they have that bitter taste in their mouths, and they played that way.
Yeah, regionals is always it's a funny thing because even the district tournaments too, man. I mean, you see these upsets, and just for instance, in 3A last year, CAC lost to Lamar. I'm just thinking one off the top of my head, and in their regional tournament, they come back and they ended up winning state. I mean, it's all matchups, and and especially since you only get that one game, sometimes teams with that just ball out throughout the entire season, whether it's an injury or just, again, a bad matchup. You just never know. So that's what makes that very, very fun for us, I guess. Maybe not so fun if you're a coach.
It's tough,
yeah.
It was tough.
Last but not least, of course, in Class 1A, you look at Jasper. They're sitting at 16-5. I think that's kind of an underrated team that we sometimes now maybe not always so much on the making noise on the state tournament level, but a pretty consistent team up there in Northwest. I guess was that North Central, Northwest. I guess North Central more so than anything. Always pretty quality team that they have there. Of course, you've got the defending state champs, Mark Tree, at 10-1. Now they haven't played a ton of games. Also, Earl, I think they're at 8-2. I actually forgot to put down their record. I think they're 8-2. Really like both of those teams in the 1A3. Also, County Line. I think Joe Brunson would appreciate the fact that they are quietly somewhat 16-3. So they win a state championship in undefeated fashion. Then they graduate a lot. I think they only brought back one key reserve, not even a starter last year. So they had to go through some growing pains. The Indians currently sitting at 16-3. Dermont out of 1A6. 1A6 has had some good starts. You think about Dermont at 13-2, Clarendon 9-4, Brinkley at 10-3. The defending runner-up, Nevada, is sitting at 16-7, and also in that conference, Blevins, which I think Blevins actually beat Nevada last week, if I'm not mistaken. So big win there for Blevins. And then in the 1A8, Bearden's sitting at 13-5, and then Lafayette County, as I mentioned, Rod Briggs got the girls and boys rolling with the Lafayette County Cougars sitting at 10-3. And, to me, Eric, this is probably a case, without I haven't done a ton of digging into 1A at this point, but I feel like, Mark Tree is probably the favorite to repeat. But then you might have a case of a Nevada. Last year they had, was it Bryson Harris that was their top player that was, 20, 25 a game. And really they kind of built that team around them. And Jamario Bell did a phenomenal job of taking that team to the state championship game. So I think we could have a case like that where maybe a team that we might not mention on here, or even if you and I talk in a month or so and we're getting closer to the postseason, that we might not mention then, they could really get hot and do some damage in the postseason tournaments.
Right now, you've got to go with the defending champs, Mark Tree. They brought so many back, and they played phenomenal. Like I said, they hadn't played, but I think 10, 11 games, and they played great. But I think the only team to beat them, I want to say Izard County may have got them in the KL Classic last week, if I'm not mistaken. But you certainly start there with those guys. But the team that actually it's two teams that, and you've mentioned both, that I'm really, really intrigued with seeing how they're going to shape out. Earl and County Line. I finally ranked County Line, I think, at 6 in my poll. With those two teams in particular, and I know Earl and Mark Tree are going to play pretty soon. They're in the same conference anyway, so those are going to be two big time games whenever they play. But this County Line team, man, they lost so much from their title team a couple of years ago, and then like you mentioned, they only didn't return much at all last year. But then they come out this season and win 16 of their first 18, 19 games, with some big wins along the way. So I think that's those two teams in particular really, really intrigue me, because I expect, the Nevadas and Brinkley's to come along. Dermont is another one that's been kind of surprising to start the season. Then they had a big win over Brinkley, matter of fact, earlier in the year. But again, County Line and Earl are two teams that I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what they're going to be able to do before they get into regional play. And in particular, this Earl team, when they face Mark Tree, the two times they're going to see him.
We've been talking with Erick Taylor, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Erick, my man, always a pleasure. When I think of high school hoops, man, I couldn't think of anybody else to chop it up with. You're the best at what you do, my brother. It's always a pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime, my friend.
Well, that'll do it for, I think this is episode 46 of Arkansas Preps Weekly. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen. We are there. We will be back probably maybe with some coaches next week. Maybe mix it up a little bit. That's what we did last year during basketball season. So we'll get one from the girls and the boys side. But hope you enjoyed this as we kind of covered what we saw throughout non-conference play, and then the first week, I guess you could say the abbreviated week of conference play. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We will catch you next time.